Welcome back, everybody. This is Eric here with Iraq Veteran 8888. All right, I want to make another video here today. A lot of folks have been asking me to talk about the situation going on with Russia and Ukraine, and I've purposely, really wanted to take a step back from this situation and not be so hasty to make some sort of a video yet. And the thing is, there's a lot of misinformation and propaganda that floats around in warfare. That's just the nature of warfare. Each side is going to try to say, they did X, Y, Z. So I don't want to put out some piece of information that is going to, give someone the wrong impression or whatever. It is very hard in this environment to be factual, I guess, until it's over and we can play Monday quarterback and look back and go, well, that's how it went. That's how it shook down. Once it's resolved, then you have the facts because it's history at that point. But while wars are happening, it can be very difficult to really know exactly what's going on. So in light of that, I'm not going to really try to discuss this from a, let's just say, geopolitical standpoint or from a political standpoint. I'm going to try to discuss this more from the vein of the importance of the Second Amendment here in the U.S. and talk about some of the struggles the Ukrainian citizens have been going through a little bit and just try to talk about it more from that particular perspective. I'm not going to give you a lot of background on the conflict and what's going on, because that would make this particular video way too long, and there's already been a whole bunch of other analysis that's been conducted on the more geopolitical and historical perspective of why these things are occurring. I want to just begin by saying that war is a very terrible thing, and it's ugly, and it's a very unfortunate byproduct of human civilization. War is very, very terrible, and it's ugly, so ugly. And the loss of human life, I just want to say, is tragic, right? I hate seeing these young Russians and Ukrainians that are killing each other day by day. And believe me, I was a young person once, believe it or not, and I wore a pair of combat boots at one point in my life, and I know what it feels like to be a young person and to feel like your country's got your back and you're being sent somewhere to take on some cause, whether you're Russian or Ukrainian. Look, nobody wants to get the news that their child or brother or husband was killed, or daughter or wife, right, or was killed in some conflict, right? There's been a lot of civilian casualties. So I think without going too far down that rabbit hole, it's just worth saying that the loss of life is tragic. And I just want to acknowledge that tragedy, both for the Russians and the Ukrainians. It's a terrible loss of life that could be avoided, and that's terrible. And I want to acknowledge how terrible it is that people are dying, and that's a bad thing, right? We don't want that. But you look at the Ukrainians, and they handed out, I believe it's some 18,000 Kalashnikovs to U.S. citizens. So right now, the far left in this country is literally eating their hat right now, because here they are, they want to support the Ukraine. A lot of them, view Russia as this invading force, which of course, obviously you're being invaded. Hello, it's an invasion. When they roll in with tanks and helicopters and APCs and they're launching missiles and blowing things up and setting off explosions and sending people in to sneak around and put sensors all over the place. Listen, it's an invasion, okay? It's a war. Right? War is ugly. It involves, the mechanized levers of war that rattle and clank and pull. They're terrible and they're noisy and they're awful. But that's war. War is chaos, and chaos is happening in the Ukraine. So what was their answer? Well, we're going to get our society armed with Kalashnikovs, and they passed out 18,000 Kalashnikovs. The left, as I said, has been forced to view this now, and they're in a weird spot, so they're having to finally understand the argument of gun owners here in America that anything can happen. It can happen at any time, and the world that you know it, as perfect as it may be, can be turned upside down immediately, overnight. One minute you're playing with your kid in the park, the next minute the park is blown up. And that's tragic, right? One thing that human beings desire so much is consistency. To be able to live and grow and be strong people and raise strong families and not have to worry about your safety, not having to worry about walking outside and getting blown up. That's a scary world that we live in. But that's the reality, is that one minute you're hanging out and the next minute it's Red Dawn, and you've got literally like the movie Red Dawn. You're sitting in school and there's the Russians right at your front door. What do? When the bear comes knocking, that's a scary situation. And the Ukraine is standing toe-to-toe with the bear, right? Now, many people, not to get on the geopolitical end of this situation, but many people view Russia as a paper tiger over this situation because, I mean, their losses have been pretty considerable. Now, again, as I said early in the beginning of the video, it's important to remember that a lot of the numbers that get thrown around, you can't always rely on it no matter what side it's coming from. So take this with a grain of salt. This comes directly from the Ukraine's defense ministry. But the Russians have lost 5,700 men. And that's, dude, what a terrible loss of life, man. You know, all those poor people, like, gosh, it just, man, it gets me choked up just thinking about it, you know. Just from the human loss, the human total, right? Equipment you can replace, right? You can rebuild planes and you can rebuild helicopters, but the human toll, man, it's so terrible, man. God, it kills me how terrible that is. And this is a modern war, boys and girls. This is not a joke. This is a war. So it has relit a very, very distinctive candle for Second Amendment support here in the United States. And that was the overall. I wanted to make this video to discuss how important the Second Amendment is for us and how bad things can happen no matter where you are on the planet, and to see it, to see where those Kalashnikovs are being handed out to the civilians in the Ukraine. That goes to show you that an armed populace is an important part of your overall holistic home protection plan, right? Your overall, protecting the motherland, so to speak, right? And, when the bad guys come knocking, you got to be able to do something, right? When you're being taken over, that's a serious thing. So people in the media pundits, and all over the internet, you always see these people say, well, you don't need an AR-15. What are you worried about, someone invading your country? Yeah, we are. I mean, look, it's a valid concern. I mean, we were attacked up in the Aleutians. During World War II, the Japanese made landfall in the Aleutians. And a lot of people don't know that we were attacked on land. Now, granted, it's the Aleutians and it's all the way in Alaska, but they had the gall to set foot on our soil. There's gun emplacements are still there in some way, shape, or form. Some of the Japanese are probably still there, right? So it's like, war is terrible, and it brings these things out in people. Where yesterday we were all being civil, and now all of a sudden today we're enemies. And think about what it does to us. Think about what war does to us, what it makes people do, what it turns people into, what it'll lead them to do. And it's scary. That's why the Second Amendment has never been more important. We should never support legislation that undermines the Second Amendment rights of our citizens. That is first and foremost, we are the standing army that stands in the way of anybody that would hurt us. We've got, over 250 million gun owners in the United States, if not more. There's so many gun owners. Like the Japanese during World War II said, a rifle behind every blade of grass. That's why they didn't want to invade our mainland in World War II. So see, it was a deterrent all the way back then, and it's a deterrent now, right? Who knows what crazy plans have been made? You can't assume that something might not at least have the potential. You have to at least acknowledge that the reality of the world we live in is that one day you could wake up and then you're in a situation where 4 days later you have 5,700 soldiers that have lost their lives trying to take your country. And that's scary. And you've had to bury your friends and your family, and you've had to bury civilians, people that didn't even want nothing to do with it. And they're just sitting there and a bomb goes off, and now all of a sudden there's just humanitarian disaster where people, innocent people, are killed. And look, civilians die in war. It's an unfortunate byproduct of warfare. And I just wanted to acknowledge the loss of human life on both sides. Because I know there's people that watch my channel in Russia, there's people that watch my channel in the Ukraine, and I also know that there's a lot of people in Russia that do not agree with this war. So just because a country does something you don't agree with doesn't mean that all the people are bad people. So I wanted to make this video under the lens of just trying to be a good human and trying to just look at the human loss, the human toll. And it's something we should avoid. It's a terrible loss of life. War is ugly. Sometimes it's necessary. I don't want to get into the politics or that geopolitical aspect of it, but I just wanted to say how terrible it is and that it does really if anything, shows that much more how important the Second Amendment is for our country. And I'm proud to be an American. I'm proud to have the Second Amendment at my back as my personal protection clause and my homeland protection clause. And I think that people need to get themselves a little bit more wired. You know, get you 10 or 15 buddies that you trust in your area that you know you can call if something bad happens. And look, it may not be someone invading. It might be a disaster. It could be a hurricane, and now you've got to get together and clean up, right? It could be all sorts of things like that. But an invasion is something you have to consider. I mean, so just want to make this video to basically it's a one-up for the Second Amendment, because look at the way the Ukraine is handling this situation. I mean, you better believe if we were being overran, would our government hand out cases of M16s? Who knows? Maybe if they were worried that, you know, their ivory tower was about to get knocked over, perhaps. But maybe right up until that point, they'd be like, we got it. That's why it's important to be ready. You can't rely on the government to arm you. Oh, well, you know, if we get invaded, I'm sure they'll hand out cases of M16s. I wouldn't be so sure about that. You might want to get something to protect yourself, because you never know when you might find yourself in a situation. And this is just, unfortunately, a very bloody and distinctive reminder of how important the Second Amendment is. Guys, have a great day. Thanks for tuning in to today's video. Big thank you to all of our Patreon supporters for supporting us. You guys rock. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. If you want to support the channel more directly, you can go over to Ballistic Ink and pick yourself up a snazzy new t-shirt. All those funds go right back into supporting our channel. Look, stay safe, be free, arm yourselves, protect yourselves, get involved in your community, get to know people in your community, form groups of like-minded people, and be prepared for anything. There's nothing wrong with being prepared. It doesn't make you crazy. It doesn't make you weird. It doesn't make you, odd or different. It just makes you smart, right? You never know when you might be the tip of the spear. And just be ready for that in case it ever happens. And, just final just reminder of the human loss that has occurred in this war. And it's terrible. And, I hope and pray for all of the families on all sides of the conflict who have lost their loved ones. And I hope they can find some peace in their heart, and maybe the world will heal. Who knows? But very terrible, and I just wanted to acknowledge it for the terrible event that it is. War's ugly, and unfortunately, we're in the midst of a war right now. So have a great day. Stay safe. Take care of yourselves. Many more videos on the way. We'll see you soon.